we're back with part 2, talking about the size of pipe bands and roster sizes, section sizes, issues like that, maximums, minimums, hot topic right now, and should be a interesting topic of debate once bands around the world get back at it, especially this year in the UK at the major championships, to see what kind of sizes we're looking at and number of entries. It'll be really interesting. But, I thought we could, maybe start with you, Alex, talking about minimum numbers. Is it really realistic for a grade 1 or grade 2 band to go out there and be judged fairly, playing only the minimum numbers?
I know we kind of referenced this in part 1, but I would say no. Those minimums are catering to the 1980s, 1970s size of bands. And it's just sort of been neglected, I think. From my understanding, it was SFU first went out with a really monster band and kind of blew everybody away. And since then, it's been, okay, we can't go out with 13 players, which, that's 5 more than the minimum. I'm referring to pipers, I guess, to be totally transparent here, but my thought is usually on pipe core sizing. But as a leader, we have to consider the drum corps too. But I believe it's 8, 3, and 1, and a drum corps with 3 and a pipe core with 8. If you're doing it simply because you're really passionate, but I feel like any band with those sort of roster restraints, or you're just hitting the minimum, without saying with 100% certainty, I'm as confident could be that there's not really an option for them to be competitive, especially against the very top bands.
Mm-hmm. David.
Yeah, on that wavelength, absolutely. No, I'm as confident as Alex on that one. Definitely, it's, as a listener, it's not as impactful. You're not going to get the same impact of a band who's just come on with 8 pipers after 24 and, drum corps of 10 to 3. The drum corps presence, this is what really sets grade 1 bands apart, is the drum corps presence. There's plenty grade 2 bands that have really top quality pipe cores who maybe struggle in their area to get out top drum corps, and the drum corps impact with the volume and presence that they bring, that's for me what makes a grade 1 band really special. And I just think the minimum numbers are there so that people can, it's basically, there's no restriction. You can compete with as many numbers as you want, really. You're never going to go on with that 8. It's there just because it's there. It's not, I don't think people look to that minimum number and think, not in the top grades, maybe definitely down the grades, but not in the top grades. You're not looking at that number and thinking, I can field a grade 1 band here because I've got 8 good, really great, strong, 8 of the best pipers in the world here. We can make a band and really do something in grade 1. No one's going in with that. And so people don't. And that's generally how it is. I think they're not going to do anything about it. That number is there just because it's there.
Well, let's take that a step further. Let's say a band that has recently won an RSPBA major. Let's say recently, it's like in the last 10 years or something. What if they went out there with the minimum numbers? Do you think they would get a fair shake? Do you think it would be a different kind of parameter? Like they might be 2 quartets playing brilliantly together with unison that can't be denied. What do you think the outcome would be if they actually did that, David?
Well, I'll say if they match volume and impact, then I think they would do okay. But that's not going to be the case. Again, the great thing about a grade 1 band is the presence that they give. It's not just the tight playing and tight sound. It's the quality of sound that you get from having more than 8 pipers. It's the sound, and although there's arguments that the more pipers you get, the more muddy it gets, and we've talked about that in part 1. And yes, to a degree, yes, because there is going to be so much distance between one piper to the next. How could you possibly play in time at that? So there is definitely a sweet spot, probably around the 21 mark, which is why I think most of the grade 1 bands probably aim to get to that 21 mark. If they get 22 or 23, they have a bit of leeway. So, yeah, I just think if 8 pipers come on, matching volume and presence, maybe they would. But I just don't see that happening.
Alex?
Yeah, I think even the loudest chanters on the planet, and the biggest, boldest reeds, 8 of them aren't going to stack up to 21 people playing grade 1 level bagpipes, projecting the way that modern chanters do. It's one, it'd be awesome, and being able to, I believe there would maybe be a clarity at 8 that isn't achieved at 21, maybe, but you're missing that. You listen to these top bands, they blow up and you can feel the whole band sound like rattling your rib cage. Like it's like it envelops the area, and you're not going to get that with 8 pipers.
Yeah, you alluded to it in the beginning, in the first part, Alex. I think the 78th Fraser Highlanders in 2007 or 2008, I'm not sure which, I can't remember, playing with 30, and had they played with fewer thoughts, or fewer pipers. I've got too many thoughts in my head. But since that time, bands have not come out with anywhere near that kind of size of a pipe section. Is it self-regulating? People contend this, Alex.
I believe that the maximum is not self-regulating, because there are years where St. Lawrence O'Toole goes out, and they've got 25 pipers. And I'm saying this not knowing exactly, but just they would have the ability to attract that number. I don't think the maximum, I believe, without having a firm rule, I don't know that bands are going to be going out with more than 24 pipers. Like above and beyond that, I think you start to approach that semi-murky level. But you have to be extremely good to have a team that can tune up 24 pipers like that. Those extra bodies take time, and then it's more things can go wrong. And I mean, from what I see, most drum corps usually land in and around 10. I think they're happy close to that, maybe 8 or 9. It's hard to say without explicitly paying attention to it. But there's always, I feel like it's the same as with tempos. If there's one year where the top bands go out for the first MSR major and they've really kind of dropped their tempos back, then people kind of have to adjust to that, because those super bands, as you kind of refer to them, they sort of set the standard. And if they're playing their march at 76 beats per minute instead of 82, then it's like, well, maybe we got to dial it back. And if they're playing the jigs in their medley at 130, and we've all been practicing them at 120, we're going to sound dreadfully slow. So you kind of have to, they get to choose where the equilibrium is, which is, a large advantage, but that's why they're the top bands. They get to dictate it. Same with the solos. If you go out playing an Inverness, playing a march at 62 beats per minute, and then someone else goes out and they're playing at 70, 62 is going to sound a little slow. But if everybody's playing at 62 and you're the one person playing at 70, they're going to think you're racing. So it's the same with pitch, or you kind of need to find that equilibrium, and I believe it tends to sort of regulate itself.
So David, do you think it is self-regulating? Do you agree with that?
Yes, but I don't think it happened quickly. I don't think it happened quickly, because there was a while where FM would come on with 27, and I do know that number because when I was playing in the Power, we were 27. But in 2013, 14, when we were in the Power, we came out in the first major with, I think it was 29, and we won the piping. So that wasn't that long ago. And Alex talked about the team of pipers. Credit to Chris Armstrong, who's pretty much the only guy doing the whole thing. So everyone had to be on the ball. Everyone's instruments were ready to go, and it was there was a lot of people. It's like, who do you drop? There was everyone did it. Everyone was standing there doing the job, and if there was a cap, how would he choose which 8, if that's the number, to go? I don't know how because a whole rank of pipers to go, and then sometimes you lead bands, and it's very easy to drop a whole rank, and it's just where do we go from there?
Yeah, Chris, I remember when we did a debate with Bill Livingston and Chris a while ago at Piping Live. Chris did talk about that, the difficult conversations, and like unfair and hard to do that when you've got everyone playing at the same level, and these people might never play again, and but it's a valid concern that we have to appreciate. We talked a little bit about that in the first part about this, the idea of fly-ins and localization of players, and the community aspect of pipe bands. How does unrestricted size affect this idea of community, the idea of the local band having to recruit from all over and to be able to get onto the contest field? Any thoughts around that, David?
Yeah, we have to accept the fact that everything's pretty much globalized now, and pros and cons to that are vast. But the nice thing about this community is we're sitting here in 3 different countries having a great little chat, and we're able to do that. And so likewise, a piper who wants to play really desperately, I'd love this, for Fife, and super quality player taking a year out, going to Spain for a year, and they're like, yeah, I'm going to be back for the whole season, and I can make Saturday practices. Can we do this over Zoom? And yes, absolutely, do this over Zoom. The first 3 months of my leadership over Fife through the pandemic was through the internet, and that was a whole different challenge all in itself. But that community didn't feel less. You still had a great group of people really on board and thriving in the sense of the band's community, the one band's community. But I know that you're trying to talk a little bit broader. I'm not, you see some great communities and some infighting communities. It's there's with that community feel, there's going to be breakaways, and sometimes it can be good and sometimes it can be bad. If you look like for the longest time, in BC, that was all really unified. They had this whole structure. It was amazing. They looked after their own players. They didn't need to do fly-ins. They could, if they wanted to have some, they could have some, and they used some. But generally speaking, they would try to recruit their own guys. And then they got too good for that, and they had 2 grade 1 bands, and then you have this fracture. And so it became not so friendly of an environment or a community. And then, I'm from Fife, and everyone knows, well, I'm not from Fife, but the band's from Fife, and everybody knows what Fifers are like. And they'll, we'll not go into the language used, but everyone is, it's a community all into itself, but it's not necessarily functional. So I really believe that building a community, a strong community around a band is the way forward to sustain a top quality band. And you need to have feeder systems. You need to be talking to the bands that are down a couple of grades so that they can feel like they're part of the bigger picture. And I'm really interested in that idea. It doesn't always work though. And I've been in situations where it just doesn't always work. It needs to all gel, and sometimes it just doesn't. So I would love to think that, having that community thing works, but we are human, and it's been done before and it didn't last. So the globalization is good in the sense, I think, because we're able to access things for players who maybe I'm talking Europe, who could play in grade 1, but there's not enough of them to make a top quality band that's going to satisfy their ambitions. And Alex spoke about this in part 1 as well. And I believe that the community thing is great, but we're part of a full community. I played in Alex's band and it was great. You felt part of the community as soon as you walked off the plane. But it was I certainly wasn't a local player either. So I don't know. I think it works and it doesn't work. It just depends on the demographic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's Alex. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was just sort of to add on to that. I mean, with the world is as accessible as it's ever been, minus COVID restrictions, which are some thunder happening here in Houston.
Sounds like a
Apologies for
lion.
that, but yeah, it felt like it. Anyway, yes. So the world is as accessible as it could be, and being able to be on Zoom, here in Houston, and then in Scotland, and you're in Canada, it doesn't feel like it's not a valid conversation. So for, I guess, having a solid community, like at least in Atlantic Canada, it's a concentrated community, but there's still quite a bit of piping that happens in the Halifax area. And, James McCaddy's doing a great job of keeping things running in Summerside at the College of Piping. We've got Trevor Kellock running things in Cape Breton. So there are a number of different communities, and I don't want to say like micro communities, because it's like we all tend to sort of rally under the Atlantic Canada banner. But that being said, I mean, we've had the benefit of having people travel to play with us too, whether it's because, when I was younger, we had several people fly from New Zealand to study with my dad, and it's not that, there's tons of high level bagpiping happening in New Zealand. But if your favorite type of ice cream is chocolate, even if there's vanilla there, maybe, I'm going to travel for the chocolate. It's like people have preferences, and I think we expect a lot from people, and playing in a grade 1 band is sometimes akin to having a salary job with a zero salary. So if people want to dedicate their own time and effort and money realistically to playing, then who are we to regulate where they're putting that in?
Sure. Yeah, it's interesting, the decline of small competitions. We've seen that for a long time in Scotland, for sure, but also, around North America too. It's if bands can't get out the full complement of players, they just don't go. They can't go, and they're not going to do that unless it's a very significant kind of event. And it's sort of, there's that argument that can be made that you're kind of self-defeating your whole environment for the sake of this kind of numbers thing, or fly-in players and the rest of it. It's all really interesting. Okay, so
I get the,
yeah, go ahead, Alex.
I get the feeling with these smaller contests, and maybe it's my lack of understanding, but I feel like there's just less money kicking around. And with bands being bigger, like for us in Halifax, we have to travel to Toronto at least, to be competing. And, the flight's $500, call it, in and around there. Then you've got 2 nights in a hotel at least. And then there's, you're eating out, the band has to get a bus. So it very, very quickly becomes a $30,000 investment between the members of the band. So going to a small contest where even outlaying half of that is required, is like, well, are we going to spend $15,000 to travel to XYZ when we can spend 30 and we'll be all set for contests in Georgetown or Maxwell or wherever?
Yeah.
I think also to add into this with different perspective, as a leader of a band, you're very conscious of the product that you're trying to put out. And if that product, you don't think that product's going to live up to the expectation, you won't do it. Forget about the cost of things. If you've got a band there's a competition this weekend, how many can make it? Half the band put their hand up. Well, great, let's just go out for fun. That's not the nature of our game anymore. It's not for fun anymore as such, just for the enjoyment. The competitive side is what people are attracted to. Nobody, and people are busier. much busier than they were. So, and there's cameras everywhere. So you've got to go, well, that wasn't my best run, but it's okay because nobody heard it. But that's just not the case anymore. You look back to when a band could really hone the band in throughout a season and really look to that. You're looking now, you've got to be out mega at the first season, first competition of the season, if you want to have any impact. So you really got to be careful. Yes, I want my band to go out and compete. I want to get that experience of competing more and more so that we can get better at competing. But is that going to be the detriment to my my whole season of the band when you kind of get, into the tarred with the same brush? Maybe you didn't have a best run, and then all of a sudden the ears change to how people listen to you. And they think, well, they're looking for all these, and if there's anything, oh, there's another one. And then it just adds to the list. So, it's, you're putting it into the lap of the gods if you have this perfect run when you're not ready to go out and your band's not of the product that you'd like to put out. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Why don't we just wrap up with one last thought question. David, the long-term effect, if this matter of size isn't resolved or stays status quo, how, on both sides of it, how do you see things panning out? Let's say over the next decade, would it continue to go in one way or the other?
I found this the hardest question you gave me because I really don't know. But we have spoken a lot about what could happen. Personally, I think I would like to see it come into place so that it almost takes out that seed of doubt. Well, they only won because of this, when actually they're still better, but they're 18 still better than you're 18, but you feel like you're getting a better crack of the whip or something like that. So in the long term, you could see how maybe people could get disheartened with the same results coming out, the same outcomes because of the quality, which then just attracts people to go to those bands. And so if you get one or two bands that keep doing the winning, or three bands that keep doing the winning, then those are where everybody wants to go. So within a grade, you almost have a ranking system that, well, if I really want to progress, I'm going to spend a bit of time with David at Fife, and then I'm going to move on because I really want to start winning. So it would be great to maybe cap that so that you might find the sort of bottom end grade one bands, to say bottom end, but everyone's quality. But you know what I'm talking about. You're not the super band. Maybe start over the years getting a chance to play at the standard of the higher bands through recruitment of top quality players that like what you're doing musically, knowing that I like what they do. I think I can fit into this band. I'm going to try in. They look like they need some numbers as well. We could maybe go from there. I tried it with this band. I didn't make it. Where do I go? So, the long-term effect, possibly if we do something about it, could be more positive in that sense. And you might get more bands winning majors and less domination from big bands. If we don't do anything, we talked about maybe the diminishing numbers of bands themselves, which means maybe less competition, less registration fees, money for the association, all that stuff that the association generates money from registrations. More bands would mean more money, and maybe that would be something.
Alex, hand over to you for the last words.
Yeah, so I think I tend to, David and I are running pretty close on this. There may be bits where I'm veering left and he's veering right, but generally kind of going to the same place. My main, if I, to summarize, being someone that is pro for it, my main apprehension on it being placed, if say they did it right away, I would think there would need to be a timeline, because if you just said all of a sudden, surprise, there's a cap here. After 2 years of people kind of trying to work through this pandemic, I feel like that would kind of be just like, not an insult, but just like it would do the wrong thing for the art. And again, with referencing before with like the short-term pain, I don't think that's going to go away And I don't know that there's really a way to avoid that short-term pain for the bands that would be impacted by having sort of a firm restriction on the roster or the competitive numbers. But I do believe that if it was to happen in whichever manner, it's going to end up resulting in more positive over the medium to long term.
Well, look, it's been a fascinating discussion. It's, one that's really, it's lively, and, you two are pipe majors, younger pipe majors of two of the best bands in the world, and bands that everyone looks up to. You're right in the thick of it, and, understand that it's a topic that, the best way to address it is to talk about it. And that's exactly what we've done here in these two parts. And, just really appreciate you guys stepping up and letting your thoughts be heard. So thanks for that.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks very much. It's been a pleasure.
All right. And all the best for the upcoming season.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks.